Hello, Zija Nation. I'm Dr. Joshua Plant, and I want to thank you for joining me on this very special Facts and Findings as we talk a little bit about a current event and how Zija International is ultimately helping you to solve a problem that has now have global implications. That's right, Roundup. This is something we hear a lot about in different advertisements, Roundup-ready crops, genetically modified organisms, and we're wanting to know what implications this has in your health. I'm here to answer some of the most common questions, and particularly how glyphosate, or Roundup, is having a huge impact on our health and wellness, and simple tricks we can do to help remove a lot of that out of our lives. So the first thing I want to talk about is a little bit about what glyphosate is. Glyphosate was originally discovered in the 1960s as a pipe cleaner. That's right. It was initially discovered in 1960 as a way of kind of removing clogged drains, similar to Drano. It wasn't until about 14 years later, in 1974, that Monsanto scientist, Dr. Franz, understood and discovered the ability that this simple molecule has as an herbicide, a non-specific herbicide, to kill all of these different botanicals. This then allowed for the commercialization of what is today the most commonly used herbicide on the planet, glyphosate, or Drano. Glyphosate gained its popularity in the early or mid-90s as well as in the early 2000s with the introduction of GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. The reason that these two spiked in relation to each other is that you have what are called Roundup-ready crops. Scientists have been able to manipulate Mother Nature and allow for certain genes to be inserted into corn and soy and other botanicals that makes it resistant to glyphosate. So farmers can indiscriminately flood their crops full of glyphosate, protecting the inherent crop they're wanting to grow from any other weeds. Sounds like a great idea. However, we are learning more and more the damaging implications that this single compound is having on our health and wellness. Just to kind of put it into perspective of how much glyphosate is now in the world, I'm going to give some startling facts. Right now, there have been 4.5 billion tons of glyphosate used as an herbicide since its introduction in 1974. 4.5 billion tons have been created and exposed into the world. This is a huge moneymaker for giant corporations such as Monsanto, which in 2015 generated $4.75 billion in sales just from the sale of their Roundup. This has caused for the rapid rise of glyphosate throughout the world, as well as the rapid rise of genetically modified organisms that are Roundup ready, where 93% of the soy across the globe now is now genetically modified, and upwards of 89% of corn. We're finding more and more genetically modified organisms entering into our food chain, such as sweet potatoes, carrots, and many others. Now, the abundance of glyphosate has had huge implications throughout, not only on our crops, but since it's used so widely, we are seeing it pop up everywhere. A recent report shows that 75% of our rain and rainwater is now testing positive for glyphosate. 75% of our rain, which should be the most pure substance on this earth that has been distilled by Mother Nature, is now inherently contaminated by glyphosate that is now being evaporated into the air. Additional reports suggest that anywhere from 60 to 100% of air samples tested are now testing positive for glyphosate. Interestingly, an independent lab, I'm going to share some of these troubling results with you, testing glyphosate amongst foods that should not have any glyphosate on them, tested them. Over 50 different products, name brands, reveals that glyphosate is widespread amongst all of the food that we're eating. For example, Cheerios registered a whopping 1,125 parts per billion glyphosate. This is a product that is marketed to feed towards children and developing infants. Tested over 1,000 parts per billion of glyphosate. Honey Nut Cheerios, 670 parts per billion. We see Kashi, a name brand organic label at 275 parts per billion. Ritz crackers, 270 parts per billion. Oreos, 215 parts per billion. Stacy's Simply Naked Pita Chips are unfortunately not that naked. They are covered in glyphosate, 812 parts per billion. Doritos, 481 parts per billion. Lay's kettle-cooked potato chips, 452 parts per billion. Little Debbie's, as if you were worried about what you're eating when you eat a Little Debbie's, you are also consuming 264 parts per billion glyphosate. Back to nature. Crispy cheddar crackers, 327 parts per billion. Lucy's oatmeal cookies, over 450 parts per billion. You can see now glyphosate has contaminated all the corners of the globe. It's found not only in our food, but our rainwater. In fact, it's now found in most of the tap water across the globe. This is something that has been troubling to the vast majority of scientists that are understanding the health challenges that this brings. This glyphosate is now being stored in our body at an alarming rate. It is found in breast milk, urine, bones, muscle, and other organs throughout the body. We are now walking cesspools of some of the most toxic chemicals that the world has ever known. So what are some of the health challenges of glyphosate? 0.1 part per billion. Remind you, Cheerios was shown at over 1,125 parts per billion. At just 0.1 parts per billion, studies show that it alters gene functions in over 4,000 different genes. Severe organ damage in rats. Now, Europe understands the damaging effects that this has and has set the allowable limit in their tap water at 0.1 parts per billion. Now, we continue going on. 10 parts per billion is toxic to the fish that are living in that water. 700 parts per billion is correlated with kidney and liver failure in rats. Now, the US has set their limit to 7,000 times higher than that the European Union, allowing over 700 parts per billion in the tap water, reminding you that that's just the water you drink, let alone the amount of glyphosate that you're seeing in your Cheerios, Kashi cereals, and a variety of other processed foods. Now, this level of health that we are seeing, or the health implications that glyphosate is seeing, isn't just found in models of rats and other things. I'm going to read some of the studies done here recently. Respect to cancer. In March 2015, leading cancer experts from the World Health Organization, International Agency for Research on Cancer, declared that glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen, labeling it a 2A carcinogen. Going on, it has been associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, bone cancer, colon cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, melanoma, pancreatic cancer, and thyroid cancer. Already, multiple class action lawsuits have gone against Monsanto and wrongful death lawsuits targeting the implications and the damaging effects glyphosate is having on people's health. Additionally, we are seeing this not only in cancer, we're seeing this with endocrine disruptors, meaning it's altering our hormone function. And they are showing that studies show that it's a lower IQ, adult obesity, and a 5% or more autism cases are all linked to exposure to endocrine disruptors. This is a troubling statistic. Now, one of the key features of the original identification of glyphosate was a pipe cleaner, meaning it would chelate certain minerals and remove them. This is something that is also very troubling because we find it to bind to many of our key nutrients, such as iron and magnesium and manganese, and actually remove them from being absorbed. This is so critical since many of the contaminants are found in food in which we are depending upon to get our nutritional source. So not only is it correlated with certain detrimental diseases, but we are also finding that glyphosate is also an anti-nutrient, preventing the absorptions of nutrients in our body. Now, what I want to do is talk a little bit about what is the future of glyphosate and what we can do to help protect ourselves. We may be seeing all of this incredible evidence suggesting that glyphosate is damaging to our health, and more consumers are becoming aware of this and wanting it removed from their lives. Unfortunately, that is wrong. In 2012, the EPA under the Obama administration allowed for a 25-fold increase in the amount of glyphosate to be used in allowable amounts in our diet. A 25-fold increase. Remind you, we are already 7,000 times higher than the European Union and 7,000 times higher than those amounts shown with respect to altered gene expression, kidney and liver damage. And under this, the heavy lobbying by the Monsanto organization has allowed for the continual exposure of glyphosate, suggesting that it is even safer than salt. What we are seeing here is a widespread corruption that is ultimately damaging our long-term health. So what can we do? The first thing that I highly recommend is purify your water. ZJ International understands just how important removing this toxic chemical from your life is. That is one of the many reasons we introduced the More Clear unit that is able to remove glyphosate as well as many other toxic chemicals to beyond detection, meaning it removes it so well that the finest tuned instruments in the scientific community is even unable to detect it in the purified water. Glyphosate, as well as many other pesticides and herbicides that are allowable at huge limits well above that which is healthy, can be removed by the More Clear unit. Additionally, More Clear unit is able to help you purify the water to standards that exceed not only municipalities, but many of the other bottled water industries that are allowing many of these toxic chemicals to be present in that water. Now, it doesn't stop there. Remember, one of the unfortunate problems with glyphosate is that it's an anti-nutrient, meaning it binds to the nutrients that we consume in our food, and it ultimately binds those and then secretes it out of our body, preventing our body from ever absorbing those nutrients. We are finding more and more anti-nutrients in our body, such as BPA, but one of the leaders is glyphosate. Glyphosate is an anti-nutrient binding iron, zinc, manganese, and many others. ZJ International tests for these compounds to ensure that they are not present on their Moringa oleifera, not even at the smallest amounts. We have a no allowable limit threshold, meaning if it's even detected, we do not allow it. This allows ZJ International to ensure that our products, such as XM Plus, not only give you the amazing amount of energy that your body needs as a great alternative to those energy drinks that are ultimately killing you, but you're also getting those nutrients from the most nutrient-dense botanical on Earth, namely Moringa oleifera in its pure form, without those anti-nutrients that have found its way into so many of the other foods that we eat on a daily basis. So when you see at ZJ International, we are here to provide solutions that the rest of the world unfortunately is ignoring. And sadly, in today's industry, we can't rely on the government, cities, businesses, or many other people to help correct these problems we're facing. We need to take control of ourselves. I am so grateful for the opportunity to teach to you today about the power you have in removing glyphosate from your life. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you next month.